currently the vice president of the Chicago Livestock Society, and we're also running the Chicago Junior Herp Society. I've been keeping and breeding snakes for far too long, 15, 20 years, something like that. And for those of you who are here for Brian and Robin's talk, one of the things we like to look at is where are these animals coming from, where are they going, and my talk's not going to be necessarily on how to keep snakes in captivity. We're going to touch on that, but really, why do you want to keep them, and what are you doing with them, and what steps are you taking to keep these animals properly? How many people actually have snakes here in the room? Okay. So we can go back and forth on this a little bit, so we can get some ideas. So first thing is caging options. One of the things that I have an issue with is right now, because of Brian Barczyk and the Bells and other people who are these huge breeders, everybody's going to racks. Racks aren't necessarily what you should be keeping if you have 1 or 2 snakes, or if you have 5 snakes. Yeah, you can put 5 snakes in a little space, but why are you keeping snakes? Are you keeping snakes because you want to have breeders? Is it your business? That's not why they do it their way. That's their business. They're trying to make money. But on the flip side, fish tanks, well, fish tanks give you a hint in the name. They're for fish. I kept snakes in fish tanks for probably half of the time I've kept snakes. And in those 10 years, I probably had 200 escapes maybe, because I kept a lot of animals. I kept a lot more than I keep now, and I've cut way back. But when I had between 300 to 500 animals with fish tanks being used, escapes happen. You have too many animals, you go through enclosures, you lift lids off. And one of the fun things about fish tanks is, if you've ever worked in a fish, if you ever worked in a pet store and sold fish tanks, one of the things you'll find out is fish tanks are not uniform. A 10-gallon aquarium is not a 10-gallon aquarium. They all might hold 10 gallons of water, but they hold it in different ways. Some are taller, some are a little wider, some are a little longer. But those things make huge differences when you're trying to put a lid on it. You get all the commercial made lids you want and all the bricks and everything else you want, but the lid is not made for that exact tank unless you can find out what the manufacturer of the tank lid used as their specs for their lids to find out what tank fits those specs. That's a lot of work, and I just don't think it's the best choice for everybody. The pros for fish tanks is they're cheap. They're readily available, come in a bunch of different sizes. They have great visibility, and they're easy to see if they're clean because they're all glass. Sometimes they're free. I've got, after when I lived in Florida, one of the pet stores I go to all the time and actually sold stuff to had a hurricane discount where everything in the back of the store was free if you wanted to take it because the roof got ripped off and they were getting everything paid for anyway. So they're like, hey, I have a bunch of fish tanks. So I went and picked up, I think, 45 fish tanks, all different sizes. That was great. The cons, they're heavy. They're just brutal, and you have to clean a bunch of them. Again, the variable sizes, while they come in many different dimensions, they also come in many different dimensions. So again, the lids won't fit well. You can break them easily. The humidity loss out of the top and the heat loss out of the top is not great for snakes. If you actually want to keep snakes the best way possible, having open top lids really kind of hurts how you can control your environment, especially in this, if you live up in the north like this. When I lived in Florida, humidity wasn't an issue. Humidity was sometimes a problem. Here, humidity is an issue. You need to have humidity in your enclosures or you're not going to have good sheds. And again, escapes, the top, and also the top opening. If you do have 5 snakes, you want to have a controlled area to keep them in. Top opening is not the way you want to go. You want to have front openings, so you have front access. One of the things I love for baby snakes, if you guys are going to get baby corns, baby king snakes, milk snakes, our boas, are the reptile ranches. They're light, they're cheap, they're stackable, they're well ventilated, they're easy to clean, and they're very secure as they actually snap down the lids. The cons is they're plastic, they're fragile, and they have limited size. These are the reptile ranches. Humidity is an issue. If you have a humid-loving species, you need to put like saran wrap or something on top of that to keep the humidity in. But you have the click down sides on each side, and I tape off this little side because there's nothing my hand can do with that. My hand's just too big to even fit in there. And the snakes will, all these little tiny tabs there, the snakes will pop those sometimes. But I love these things. If you got a bunch of babies, they're like $10 to $15, And the biggest thing when you buy a snake is you have to have an idea of where you're going with the animal, how big is it going to get, but you always need a smaller enclosure to start with. You don't want to get a 4-foot enclosure and put a baby corn snake in it. It's not going to do well for you, and it's not going to do well for the snake. What I much prefer nowadays, now that I've gotten realistic, are the pro grade tanks. And the other bonus of these is, besides vision, the rest of these companies vend at this event. So you're supporting this event, you're supporting the hobby. And Bolophile just did a huge auction for US Arc, who's defending our hobby. So kicking back money into these companies that are doing something for the hobby, either through support of the shows or through support of US Arc. And a lot of these guys also donate money to US Arc as well. The Visions are these guys, if you guys aren't aware of them. Usually they're gray, have the drop down light, and you can get different ventilation. They're expensive, but they're great. I love these things for most animals, and I'm also weird that a lot of guys are gotten away from heat lights, but that little thing in the middle that drops down is for a heat dome to fit into. And I like heat lights because I think they give snakes a more natural way of heating themselves than a lot of other heating elements do. Below that's the Bolophiles, and that's actually 2 4-footers that they make a connection for, so you can have an 8-foot long cage if you want a really big cage. The Bolophiles keep humidity amazingly well, sometimes too well. So you have to know what kind of species you're going to deal with if you want to go with Bolophiles. Animal Plastics is on top there, and that's one of their hinge designs. They also have slide front designs, but Animal Plastics does not have a good picture of their slide front designs on their webpage. So I don't have any. This is the best picture I could find from their stuff. And the PM cages, those guys are out here today. One bonus I like over Animal Plastics over PM cages, Animal Plastics are going to cost more because they're thicker. The plastic's actually thicker. It'll hold humidity and it'll hold temperature better. You have less fluctuation. If you walk out your door and let the cold air come in, it's not going to affect your animal right away with the Animal Plastics, whereas PM and a lot of the other cages have thinner material. Obviously, temperature's going to get through that easier. Just something to keep in mind when you're trying to choose things. If you're only picking 1 or 2 cages, sometimes spending the extra 50 or 80 bucks is worth it if you're really trying to make the best thing for your animal. Racks, I have racks. I'm not going to say I don't have racks. I don't like racks, but they're definitely convenient. They're huge space savers. They're easy to clean. You can just pull out the drawers and scrub them down. But again, why are you keeping the animals? Do you want to see the animals? Do you have snakes that are moving you want to see and what they're doing? Because the cons of racks is you can't really see them. Generally they're definitely narrower top to bottom, so the snakes have less ability to move themselves, what they want to do. And one of my favorite quotes is, everything in a cage is arboreal. So no matter what snake you're keeping, it's arboreal when you put it into a cage. Everything, the snake's going to use everything it possibly can inside that cage. I've got sand boas at home that'll climb straight to the top of their cage, and that's about as terrestrial as you get for a snake, with the exception of, because I know I have at least one person who'll correct me on that. There's definitely elephant trunk snakes that are fully aquatic, not arboreal, but everything that's terrestrial will climb. Also reduce stimulation for the animals. There's a huge research movement on looking into what snakes, how well snakes learn and how well they think. And if you ever had a snake escape, I think it's the best example of the intelligence of a snake. We test intelligence in rodents by giving them a maze to go through. And we let them go through once and we test see how long it takes them to go through a second time. But we give them a tree at the end of the maze, so they run that maze. They want that food. We give a snake, put a mouse the other end of the maze, the snake's just going to sit there until it decides it wants the mouse, or the mouse comes to it, because that's their half and don't move. So you can't do normal intelligence tests with snakes. But if you keep snakes, you definitely get to learn that they are quite intelligent. If one gets out, like I said, I had a bunch of escapes, and if you didn't fix the way they escaped, they're getting out the same way within a day. They learn it, and they absolutely know it. There's a lot of work with the way they're scenting nowadays. Looks like if you guys after a feed, if you ever see a snake rub their chin after a feed, we have to anthropomorphize that into saying, oh, they're cleaning their face. Everybody makes that assumption. They're cleaning things off their face. For what? the snakes really care if their face is clean? Are they really like trying to take a napkin and wipe their face? We had a guy that came in and did a talk for us. He did a huge project where he went out every night and videotaped a bunch of cottonmouths in the wild, just doing their thing, without touching them, without involving them, just night vision, and watched them. And every interaction they had with a potential food item, when they were at their chosen spot, afterwards they would rub their chin. Sometimes it was 2 hours afterwards. But he had one where a mouse came down, almost came to the cottonmouth, went back the other way, and the snake did not move for another 2 hours. And he didn't move for 2 hours, which I think is the most amazing thing of the whole story. But after 2 hours, the snake got up and rubbed its chin. And the next day he got there early, snake came up, came right to that spot where it rubbed its chin, smelled that, went right back to the spot where it was coiled up the night before, coiled up, and sat there and waited for the mouse to come back the next day. He had multiple observations where the snakes, post-feeding, would find a branch that they rub their chin on. They show up the next time they showed up, they go right to the branch they rub their chin on. And there's definitely something where they're saying this is a good spot for food, a good spot to be. So there's things that we have in research now that are showing snakes have they're much more intelligent than we ever give them credit for. So when you have them in racks, you're limiting their stimulation from the outside. I have snakes that, my black-headed pythons, I'll put in boxes that are far too small for them because they just push them around the cage. They're bored, they just move them. It's like a ball, but they can put their head in it and carry it around the cage and then drop it down. They look stupid carrying a headless box around on their head, but then they're doing it consistently. So it's not like, oops, I got my head stuck. They're going, oh, this is something I can play with. And there's limited light for the snakes. One of the rep for ZoomEd, Shane Anger, if you want to talk to somebody about UV lights, he's just done a ton of research on UV. At the amateur level, there's been a lot of research done on professional levels, and he's read all those papers and he's come to his own conclusions. We've argued about whether snakes need UV or not. There's been a lot of evidence that shows snakes respond to UV. They have increased calcium in their blood from UV, and that says they need UV, to my mind, that there's some benefit for them. We have egg binding in captivity. You don't have egg binding in the wild. Is that strictly because we don't give them enough exercise and get them too fat, or is it because they don't have enough calcium in their blood to control their muscles well enough, whereas the UVB exposure will give them an extra calcium? So, for the basics of snake keeping, you got to choose what kind of heat you want. With belly heat, you've got under tank heaters that are made just for individual tanks. You have heat tape. Same is true with back heat. And for overhead heat, you have radiant heat panels and spot bulbs, or the mercury vapor bulbs, which will put off UV. Does everybody have any questions on any of that stuff? What I mean by any of that? Yes?
Well, just asking, I thought I read somewhere where it was not a good idea to put, say, heat and UV together, in one bulb.
No.
Is it better to have them separate?
The sun comes with both. I think that would come from if you have your room particularly warm. Some people try to heat the room and then put the heat and the UV together. The snake has to take the heat with the UV. It can't just get UV without. And I think it's more a lizard thing, because a lot of lizards will definitely get up and heat up a lot and then get away from the heat, but you might still want to get them to have UV. And you'll limit depending on your wattage of your bulb, you would limit the amount of UV exposure they have by the fact that you're giving them so much heat so quickly that they can't take anymore, and UV only travels so far. So that could be one reason for it, but that would just mean that you need to choose the appropriate bulb for your enclosure and for your situation. That's the other thing that I forgot to mention. First thing I always want to say in these talks is I had the first phrase of one man's opinion, because I can't tell you how to keep your animal. I can breed everything but common boas when it comes to snakes. Everything I've ever tried to breed besides common boas, which everybody else in the world can breed, I've been able to breed. I can't tell you to do it at your house because I'm not at your house and I'm not with your animals. So the one you have to, when you go see people online giving advice and they're just like, this is the only way to do it, don't listen to that person, regardless of who they are, because they skipped the first thing. They don't know what your house is like.